really happy to have you on the Original You podcast, Kaitlyn. And I'm going to start with our first question, which is, who are you in this moment? Not what people think you are, who you're supposed to be, but who you really feel yourself to be.
Right now, I would probably answer that question as someone in transition. I'm currently finishing up my time within the US as a student. So I would say I'm someone who's going through a lot of different changes right now, being an international student and sort of figuring out what it is and where I want to be in this next step of my life, whether it's staying in the US or potentially trying to move to a different country. So that's sort of how I would answer that question of someone who's going through a lot of different changes, with a background of constantly living sort of a nomadic lifestyle. I've sort of always been around moving throughout my childhood because of my dad's job. And so I would say that that is something I'm very much used to in my life is changing. But yeah, I would say that this is a transition that I've never been through or have experience with, going from being a student and having sort of everything done for you and having all of these resources available for you to sort of just being thrown out into the real world where I'm trying to get a job and trying to sort of navigate that path for myself.
So you would kind of identify with someone who is transitory,
Yeah.
and you have been since you were very little.
Yeah.
And so, does that mean transition actually comes easier to you because you've been through it a lot?
Yeah, I would say so. I'd say that I'm a very adaptable person. I think I don't enjoy change. I'm very much somebody who likes to be in control and know that I sort of have control over my life. And I think with change, you have very little control of you don't really know what the path is going to be. So it's something that still scares me. But I think as I've gone through every single change that I have, whether it's moving as a young kid or going to college in the US, or even just moving into an apartment from a dorm room, I think I've been able to adapt very quickly. I think it's something that I know I can take on. And I think that's what sort of has gotten me through it and made me a very adaptable person is I have a lot of confidence in sort of my ability to get through it.
Yeah, you're raising, I think, a really interesting um, question or issue about control and the ability to surrender control.
Yeah.
So, would you say it's pretty easy for you to give up control?
I'd say no, it's something I'm very much working hard on.
Right.
I tend to find myself in just very small parts of my life trying to control it, whether it's something as small as the thermostat in my apartment with all my roommates. I find myself sort of trying to have control over everything because if something isn't the way I see it to be, I find that it sort of gives me a lot of anxiety, and I'm someone who's grown up with a lot of anxiety. And so I think it's something that I try very hard to work on of, okay, it doesn't necessarily need to be the way I intend it to be. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean it's the end of the world. So I have tried to give up control in a lot of areas of my life, but I think there are still parts where I find I don't need to give up control. And I think that's where my boundaries come into place of this is something that I do think that I need to be in control in.
Yeah. What I was actually wondering also was that if so much movement in your youth, in your younger days, and now kind of adapting or adopting, I guess, this nomadic life, um, you naturally, because of the big transitions, have to give up control. So in the little things, you want more control to
Yeah.
kind of compensate and balance out.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of my way of adapting in a way is because I've had to change my life around so much growing up. I find that just taking control straight away is my way of sort of setting down my place and being like, okay, this is how I'm going to accommodate to this change. Let me just try and control everything.
Well, so you touched on this a little bit, but when you think about the shifts and changes in your life, um, to what extent has family, education, mentors, the kind of human element really shaped your life?
I would say that my family have had a very big influence in how I am as a person. Not so much in a mentoring way. I think it's just more of the way that they set examples for me. My dad is somebody who is very strong-minded and he's very, very outgoing, very well-spoken. And I think that's sort of helped me become confident in who I am because I look at how he's able to captivate a room. Any room he walks in, he's able to captivate his audience. And I've sort of learned tips and tricks from him on, okay, like he will walk in a room and not care about what people think. And I think that's something that he's really taught me and sort of tried to instill in me since I was very young. Anytime I would come to him upset about something, about being bullied as a young kid or having something not go my way, he would always reply with, why does it matter? Why does it matter what that person cares about you? Why does it really affect you? At the end of the day, it's your life, not theirs. And if they're going to comment on your life, then they're just taking time out of their day. And I think that is something that has sort of been in the back of my head ever since I've been a young child. And I don't think I really understood what he meant until I came to university and I sort of studied psychology for myself. And I learned that people will care more about how you are perceiving them than how they are perceiving you. And I think that is sort of something that I think my dad was trying to get across to me is that these people care more about how I'm thinking about them, about what they come across as, than what I am coming across as. And so I would think that that has sort of built my confidence growing up, having my dad sort of be that guidance. And then in terms of my mom, I think she was more of the empathetic side of who I am. I think she sort of did care more about what people thought, but in an empathetic way. It was, let me put myself in their shoes. Why does them caring show what they're going through? And so I think I got a good balance of sort of having empathy for people and their situations and being able to put myself in other people's shoes, but also not letting that affect my confidence or my ability to do something at the end of the day. And I also had two older brothers, and I think I would say they were my mentors more.
Mm.
Um, one of my brothers, he was very athletic, and my other brother was very social. And I think I got a mix of both of them. I would look up to my brother who was athletic, and I would strive to be like him. I wanted to be the captain of the swim team, just like he was. But then I also wanted to be the social sibling, and I wanted to get along with everyone and sort of have that personality as well.
Cool. So your family has really had a big impact on who you've become.
Yeah.
Education, teachers, other mentors?
I would say education, being an international student, I think has
Mm.
really played a big role in my open-minded mindset. Um, from just moving to the US after being sort of away from like in different environments where everybody's from a different walk of life. You could have people who have been in, so I went to high school in Thailand and I had friends who had only ever lived in Thailand, but then I had friends who had lived in six different countries and could speak three different languages. And so you had different experiences from so many different people. And I think that a lot of people that I've met in the US at university haven't really had something similar to that, where a lot of people from their high school most likely have just been in the same place their whole life. And if they've moved around, it's most likely within the US. And I think that growing up in an educational system where you are being exposed to so many cultures and people and languages and all of these different experiences has really set me up to when I moved here to be so open. It was so normal for me to have somebody whose parents were from really different countries or speak multiple languages. And so I think I've always been very open to different cultures and accepting them rather than judging them. And I've
Mm.
always been somebody who's very much open to any culture and trying something of a different person's culture, which I felt that wasn't really as big of a thing in the US as it was in Asia.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm definitely getting a lot of flavor of humanity and, kind of it's almost like an anthropological upbringing that you had. Um, but what about technology? What role has technology played in that, in the internationalism, communication?
Um, I would say it hasn't, technology hasn't played a huge role in creating who I am. I would say that technology has definitely enabled me to be able to sort of be in contact with so many people of my life because I'm always moving around. I was never able to be around my grandparents or my cousins. And so sometimes it was very isolating when it would just be my immediate family spending Christmas together or holidays because we never sort of got to have big family gatherings because everybody was always just moving around. And I would say that's where technology came a lot into play of being able to still be in contact and let my family members know what's going on with my life and stay in touch. But other than that, I would say that technology didn't really have a huge role.
And when you were using communication tools and technology, what did you primarily use with family and
I
friends
would
to stay
say
in touch?
Skype and FaceTime. I remember having lots of Skype FaceTime calls with my family growing up.
Mm.
And that was a way I sort of stayed in touch. And also, I think as I've gotten older, a big thing that I think has made me grateful for technology is sort of Instagram and Facebook, because I've been able to reconnect with people who were my friends when I was 4 years old living in New Zealand and sort of get in touch with them. And I don't think that would have been possible if it wasn't for social media. And I do really appreciate that because even now that I've moved on and moved into a different country from my high school, I'm able to see what everybody from my high school is doing still and sort of keep in touch and keep my roots still.
Hmm. That's cool. One of the things that I'm thinking about is that you don't have any accent. You sound very American, I think, because my ear might be off. I don't know what my own accent is, but I think you sound American.
Yeah, I get like it depends who I'm talking to.
Really?
I find that if I'm speaking to Americans who have lived in America their whole life, I've been told I sound Australian, I sound British. And then in Australia, definitely get told I sound American. I get mistaken for American a lot. Um, but I think part of it has come from being moved around so much. I've picked up different snippets of different languages.
Hmm.
So, one thing that I always get called out on is the way I pronounce my A's. I elongate my A's, and I think that's something that Americans don't do um in their
Okay.
accent. And so if I say things like Thailand, I will elongate the A. And I think it's because I also can speak Thai, and in Thai, it's elongated. And so that's
Oh.
sort of what has caused my accent to be the way it is. And a lot of when my friend from home came to visit me in Boston, all my friends were like, "Oh my God, you guys have the exact same accent." And I think it's
Yeah.
because we sort of have the same upbringing of learning Thai and having that background of a different language.
So how do you say Thailand in Thai?
In Thai,
Yeah.
ประเทศไทย. So it's very different to how you would say it in English, but a lot of the vowels in Thai are elongated.
Okay. Wow, that's really cool. Um, so are there any challenges you've encountered that, stick out in your life that you had to overcome? That, you wouldn't be the person you are today.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that I've sort of had to go through was probably moving to the US.
Mm.
Being so far away from my family. My whole family live in Thailand. And I had two older brothers, but they were 5 and 6 years older than me. So they moved out of the house, and I essentially became an only child in high school. I received a lot of attention from both my parents because I was the only child at home. And at that time, when my brothers left, my parents were going through a divorce. And so I feel that they sort of overcompensated in caring for me. And so I was very much not an independent person at all. My brothers would always be making fun of me because every time they came home, they would see how much my mom would do for me. And I think that sort of came from her empathetic personality type of she just wanted to protect me. And so I was always having everything done for me, whether it was my mom going out of her way to drive me everywhere or make me dinners and make very specifically because I was a very picky eater growing up. And so she would do pretty much everything I ever needed. And I never really taught, like, learned a sense of like identity of myself and to be able to be independent. And so coming to university, it was a huge shock, especially because it was right after COVID. And during COVID, there was no need for me to be independent. I was at home all the time. So I didn't really need to learn how to do anything for myself. And so when I came to university, it was very bad. I did not know how to do laundry at all. Couldn't do very like simple tasks, didn't really have an understanding of how to be an independent person. And in my first semester, I very much struggled. I wanted to go home. I almost dropped out because it was just a very, very difficult time for me to adjust because I had been somebody who had had everything done for me and I had to go and do it all by myself, away from any family. And it was just a very scary feeling because I also had this feeling of not belonging and not fitting in because everyone within the US had sort of had very similar experiences of high schools and their upbringing of just living in America, and I had no clue about any of that. I didn't know what half of the things they were talking about were. I didn't know the social norms. I didn't know some of the things that they would talk about. And so it just felt very isolating for me because it felt as though nobody really understood me when I would talk about something like that was very international. Like one example I always give is in Asia, it's very, very common to have a maid and a driver. Pretty much everyone has one. And so when I would talk to people in my class and be like, oh yeah, my maid or my driver, it would come off as very like privileged and it wouldn't come off as just natural. Whereas if I were to talk to somebody who had lived in Asia, they would understand that that was a very normal thing. And so I think for me, I just felt very isolated all the time, especially being in such a big university. Um, and I eventually did get through it. And after my freshman year, I absolutely loved being here because I found my group of people. But I remember I hadn't seen my grandparents for 3 years. And the last time they had saw me, I was in high school. And then it was 2 years after I'd been in college, and I went to see them. And the first thing both of them said to me was, you are a completely different person. You have completely changed in the best way possible. You have grown up and matured, and you have a sense of identity now. And I think that anyone I talk to now who has met me when I was in high school and has met me now, they can very much see that I'm a completely different person in the best way because I used to be very, very shy. I used to sit in the corner, not say anything. And now I think people struggle getting me to be quiet. And I sort of think that that's come from my ability to
Great.
just sort of have confidence in myself.
That's great. I mean, you volunteered for the podcast. That says something. So I'm curious, how did you make the decision to go to university so far away?
It's very common. So since I did go to an international school, it's either people will choose to go to the US or the UK. And my older brother, he did go to the US, and I think most of it came down to I'd always watched American TV shows and always wanted to live that lifestyle and go to
Mm-hmm.
college and have that American experience. So that's why I chose America over the UK. But I think part of me just wanted to try something new. Um, and Boston University, where I went, had a very strong Thai community. A lot of people I knew, like from internships, had worked at Boston University. So Boston University has a very strong name in Bangkok. A lot of people are alumni from there. And so I think part of me expected to have like it to be more present in my life, the Thai community. Um, but that's why I chose to go to the US because I felt as though it was more international,
Mm-hmm.
and there would be more people from different countries.
Cool. Any closing thoughts
No.
about who you have become? I mean, are you happy with the changes at this time? Because I mean, you'll keep changing, right?
Yeah, I
um,
definitely think that who I am today, I'm happy with who I am. I feel that I've learned how to set boundaries, how to be confident, and sort of how to be myself. And I think that was the biggest thing that I learned was sort of figuring out who I was, because once I figured out who I was, I felt like everything else sort of made sense. It was, I knew what I didn't like. I knew who I would get along with. I knew my personality type. And I think that's sort of what has made me as much confident as I am today.
cool. This is great. Thank you so much. I
No
really enjoyed
worries.
this. I really enjoyed learning about you.